Okay, so I got a few emails this week asking me if I had any tips on starting talent marketplaces like the Unicorn Factory, and I figured I would use this opportunity to create a quick little video talking about how I would approach building something like the Unicorn Factory today, and more importantly, how to avoid probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see first-time founders make when they embark on building something like a talent marketplace or any other type of software business for that matter. Now, the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I've started to notice a pattern. So as some of you may know, I have, a mastermind where I basically help people set up their marketplace businesses. But I also, have a lot of calls with people that watch my videos who basically want to have tips on how to start sites like the Unicorn Factory or something of that kind. And I'll probably say 80% of the time, what people want to find out about is what are the tools that I'm using, how my workflow is set up, how does the back end of the Unicorn Factory work, what are the features that I have, and how do they build those features themselves. And I'll probably say that 80% of each call that I have is mostly about the technical side of building a product. And to be completely honest, I understand it because that is actually what I mostly talk about on this channel. However, the problem with focusing purely on that side of getting your marketplace up and running means that oftentimes it leads to you overlooking the actual most important thing of your business, which are your customers. And so what I want to do today is I actually want to tell you some pretty important lessons that I learned about bringing the Unicorn Factory to Canada that will hopefully show you what the trappings are of simply focusing purely on the product and kind of putting the business side of things to the side. Let's rewind though. So for anyone that doesn't know, the Unicorn Factory is a freelancer marketplace that I started about 6 years ago in New Zealand. At the time, I was doing Facebook ads and I needed to find clients, and I figured, why not build my own version of Upwork or Fiverr? Part of the reason why I wanted to do it is I just discovered some no-code tools like Webflow and Airtable, and this seemed like a fun project to work on. And so I kind of spent a few weeks just building out a basic version of my site in Webflow, and now it's evolved into being the biggest freelancer marketplace in New Zealand. I mean, obviously they're Upwork or Fiverr, and I think on a global scale, they're obviously way bigger ones. But when it comes to New Zealand, we got that market on lock at the moment. But yeah, the way that the Unicorn Factory started was super simple. It was just a simple marketing site similar to this here now, just way uglier because I designed it myself. And then what I'd do is if a freelancer wanted to be on there, I'd just jump into Webflow and I'd just manually add them as a freelancer entry, and then you could simply click into their profiles if you were interested. And at the time, there was a contact form on the page where you could simply fill out the contact form, and then that information would be forwarded on to the freelancer, and then the freelancer would reach out to the client and they'd kind of take it from there. And so the idea behind it was super simple. Businesses in New Zealand wanted to find local, reliable freelancers that they could work with, and freelancers wanted to find business opportunities with local businesses, and the Unicorn Factory essentially became that connector. And I need to emphasize this because it's been a long time ago. When I started the Unicorn Factory, a lot of the stuff that I was doing was incredibly manual. So when, for example, a freelancer would sign up, the way that they'd sign up is they would send me an email with all of the information, and sometimes they'd just send me a link to their portfolio site, and I would then manually go into the Webflow CMS and enter their details and upload their photo and all that kind of stuff. And when they would want to make changes or add some different information, I'd have to jump back into the Webflow CMS and type it in. And at the beginning it was fine because there was only like 8 of us, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I could do it in 2 minutes, but eventually things started to pick up, and it kind of became a little bit tedious, managing people's profiles and, uploading job listings. And that's ultimately when I started to really dive into the no-code tools. And that's when I started using tools like Airtable. That's when I started using tools like Zapier, which I no longer use. I use make.com now, and so on. But honestly, for probably like the first 100 to 150 leads that we got through the Unicorn Factory, it was mostly me doing things manually for free, by the way, which is a completely different story. But yeah, eventually I was like, okay, something needs to give here. Let's figure out, how we could potentially automate some parts of it. And that's when I started, discovering these automation tools. And before you knew it, now we've kind of grown into this process, into like what it is now. I've got my marketing site. We've got a few hundred freelancers on the site. We've kind of got all these different unique landing pages for different categories that we serve. So for example, if you want to hire a design freelancer, for some reason my internet's real slow today, you can just click in here, supposedly. There you go. And you have all these like unique landing pages, with different profiles and all that kind of stuff. And also besides that, I also created 2 user portals, one for the freelancers where they can apply for jobs. And I also created a client portal where they can post jobs and message freelancers. And so it's essentially gone from me spending all my time manually introducing people to each other to it now being a fully automated self-serve platform. And in fact, at the moment, I probably spend like 2 to 3 hours a week on it, mostly doing some customer support stuff. But I'm researching how to get that time down to, 15 minutes a week, to be determined. But in short, what I'm trying to say is that, it started off as a manual, tedious thing. And then eventually, as I started growing the business, it got more and more automated. And now it's pretty much fully automated. And basically, we help, a lot of clients and freelancers connect with each other through the site. Now, this brings me to the main point of this video is, as some of you may know, a few years ago, I moved to Canada. And when I got here, I kind of decided that maybe I should take what I did in New Zealand that was working very, very well and just replicate it here in Canada. And so I was like, okay, I know how to find customers in New Zealand. I know what the onboarding process looks like for freelancers and for clients. I know, what pricing model works. And in short, if I simply jump into Webflow, copy my template into a new project, and then copy my Airtable dashboard into a new Airtable base, then in theory, I should have this thing up and running in like 2 to 3 days, and we will be able to just basically replicate what I'm doing over there here. And I did it. I probably spent a week on it. I actually made a little YouTube video series about it, which by the way I removed because, the vlogging was a little cringy. But long story short, I replicated it, went out, found a bunch of freelancers who looked super legit, add them to the site, and then I just started going through the same playbook that I went through with the Unicorn Factory New Zealand. Now, pretty quickly, I realized that things in Canada are going to probably not work in the same way as they do in New Zealand. The first thing that I noticed is that ad costs to acquire customers, which was my go-to strategy in New Zealand, is very expensive in Canada. And I did some research into why, and it became pretty obvious. Now, while there are sites like Upwork and Fiverr that also serve New Zealand, I don't think that they particularly care about the New Zealand market. And so ultimately what that means is that from a paid advertising perspective, it's a very uncompetitive market in New Zealand. North America, not so much. Here, everyone is spending the big bucks to acquire customers, okay? And it's not just other freelancing platforms, it's agencies that you're competing with. It's, the way more niche marketplaces that are using these platforms as well. And so I realized pretty early on that the cost to acquire customers in Canada was going to be significantly higher than in New Zealand. And just that little thing in itself kind of threw things a little bit off teal, because now the pricing model that I'm using in New Zealand is starting to not make a lot of sense here, because now the margins get a lot smaller, you know. And if I also factor in that, okay, if the cost of the ads go up even further, then it might become completely unprofitable. And so ultimately I had to think about, okay, I'm going to need to come up with a slightly different strategy here in order to make this work. And the thing about it is I already had this entire system and platform built out. All of the features that I had in New Zealand, I had going on the Unicorn Factory Canada. And ultimately, I was just noticing that it wasn't working as well in Canada as it was working in New Zealand. So I procrastinated over it for a few months, but then I sat down and I was like, okay, my job, I need to figure out what exactly is going on here. Why is it harder to acquire customers? Why are people not pulling the trigger? And so what I decided to do is to essentially take 5 steps back. Okay, so I kind of started the Unicorn Factory Canada from like the point that it was in New Zealand, which from a product or platform perspective at least. And I decided, you know what? We're taking out the entire client portal and we are taking a few steps back. And we're going to go back to what got us to the dance in New Zealand. And that is to actually do good, hard customer conversations. Okay, and so what I ended up doing is I decided that instead of going through a sign-up process like on the Unicorn Factory New Zealand, clients now come in and they just reach out to me and they tell me what the job is that they are trying to hire for. Okay, so they'll come in, they'll give me their company details, and they'll basically submit this little form here, and they'll tell me what it is that they're looking for. And then from here, what will happen is it redirects them to a page where they can then schedule a call with me. Now, out of all the people that fill out this form, I'll probably say about 7 out of 10 schedule a call with me. The rest supposedly don't like doing calls, but this here was a super important part in the learning process for me on the Unicorn Factory Canada, because what I mean now is that I was actually getting to have conversations with my customers who were thinking about hiring freelancers. And throughout that process of having these calls with these customers, I learned so much about how Canadian businesses operate and how it's different from New Zealand businesses. I also understood, or I started to understand, hesitations that businesses have about hiring freelancers, experiences that they've had on other platforms. And by simply being on the call with them, it was a lot easier for me to actually address some of the concerns and the objections that they had about freelancers. And ultimately, what that allowed me to do is to just deliver a way better service for them. And so, throughout my time doing these calls, I've, just learned that, a lot of people just sometimes don't know what they're doing when it comes to actually hiring someone to help them with whatever it is that they're looking for, For example, I had a conversation a few weeks ago with someone who was, had their site running on WordPress and they couldn't change any of the data in the any of the website content. And so we got a chance to have a talk about, other alternatives that they have and, just different ways of doing things. And this is something that is very hard to do when you are all in on a self-serve product that is fully automated and fully productized. And, whilst I understand that that part doesn't seem particularly appealing or particularly, exciting to do it all manually, I actually do think that this is what makes people who do well stand out from people who essentially just want to become no-coders, for lack of a better term. So I started doing this, and now things started to turn around because I started to understand, okay, what are the objections that they have? And now I also started to understand, how big of a problem it is that they had, and that allowed me to influence the way that I would charge people to use the platform. And so just for a bit of context, the way it works on the Unicorn Factory is you pay a listing fee for posting a job on the site. Freelancers pay credits for introductions and leads. What I do on the Unicorn Factory Canada is completely different. So I've got 2 different things that I do. The first thing is I still have a client portal that I give people access to, but If someone is experienced hiring and they're trying to hire for a role that we already have a lot of talent for, then what we do is we charge an annual fee. It's $300 a year at the moment, and they get access to our entire portal, and they can basically just message the freelancers directly and handle it directly with them. And it basically, the value is that we do all the pre-vetting for them and basically shortlist people who we would hire as well. But then, and this applies to probably 80% of the people that use our platform, are the people who actually don't know what they're doing when it comes to hiring. They've never hired someone before. They've had bad experience hiring people before. And what we do in that particular case is we do what's called a concierge service. And this one's important because I actually recommend this to anyone who's thinking about setting up a B2B marketplace. The concierge service essentially is a white glove solution for what it is that your marketplace does. So on the Unicorn Factory, when a client, New Zealand, when a client signs up, they create their account, they create their profile, they create their job listing, they pick all the freelancers from their shortlist, they schedule all their interviews, they get all the proposals. With the concierge service, we do all of that, and the stage when the client comes back in is when we have shortlisted it from, say, 15 to 16 options down to 3 options who we think are the best fit at different price points or, different availability, different skill set. And what that means is that the barrier to hiring the right person is a lot lower because you actually have someone on your side who is actually doing the work for you. And what we do for that is we charge a placement fee, and that placement fee is quite a bit higher than it is to pay for the self-serve version of the platform. But what I found is that people actually prefer that over the self-serve version, because oftentimes if you're going to spend like 5 to 6 to 7K on hiring someone, you really don't want to get it wrong. So actually having someone that can actually help you through that process, it does solve a problem that can sometimes add up to like $1,000 or whatever it may be. And so ultimately, what I learned from this is that, when you have an idea for like a marketplace, or you have an idea for, any other type of business for that matter, unless it is just best starting off with a more manual version of what you're doing. And then as you start to understand the user journey, the problems, the objections, then you will essentially experience it, hear it, learn it, and then you can start implementing it in a more productized version. And so I'm very likely not going to be doing like all of these calls forever. Maybe I will. I mean, I actually love doing them, but ultimately it's a lot easier to now create a more customized version of what something like this could look like in Canada versus New Zealand. And that is essentially what I recommend to anyone who's starting their own marketplace. Keep it simple to get started, talk to customers, and use that as a starting point to figure out what it is that you should build. Okay, now from a real tactical perspective, what is it that you should build in order to get started? So the first thing that I'd recommend doing is actually dedicating like a solid week to doing real good market research. So first of all, you need to figure out your positioning. Where do you fit into the market? Who is your target customer? And if your target customer is anyone, then you need to spend 2 weeks on the market research part, because you really need to dig in and find a part of the market that you can focus on first, and then in the future you can expand on it. You want to research your competitor, you want to figure out pricing, you want to basically know all of the things before you bring it to the market, because that will make the entire experience of then delivering value to the market a lot easier. Once you've figured out what it is that you're going to do, who you're going to do it for, how your business will make money, and how you'll find customers, then you put all of that to the test. And all you need to do to put it to the test is to keep it super simple. So create a simple one-page website that can look something like this, that explains what it is that you do, okay, who you serve, what problem you solve, and how it works, and then add a simple call to action, which can be something like filling out a form here where they can tell you who they are, what they do, and what it is that they're looking for. Then, and this part is so important, once they fill out this form, get them to schedule a call with you, because it is those conversations where the magic happens, and that is all you need. So a simple landing page that you can create in Webflow, a cal.com integration that people can use to schedule calls with you. And then also something like you can use Google Sheets or Airtable to send all of the form submissions so that you know who is reaching out about hiring someone on your site. The next thing that I would do is once you have this thing set up, you're really already good to go to bring what it is that you're doing to market. But what you'll probably find is that people will not find you because you're new. People don't know who you are. And when I started, now with the Unicorn Factory New Zealand, people just find me just through organic search and ads and just like general brand awareness. But when you're starting from scratch, no one's going to know you. So you're going to have to find people. So what I recommend doing is building an Airtable database and creating a table with all of the potential customers that you could have, and then just set up a process for reaching out to them. Okay. If you are targeting marketing agencies, okay, just write a simple cold email saying like, hey, my name's Connor, I'm from so-and-so. If you focus on a local market first, it's a lot easier for you to get traction because people will recognize, where you're from. But you just basically say, hey, my name's Connor, I'm so-and-so, I'm just researching a new business, or I'm just working on a new project that basically helps whoever your target customers do whatever problem you solve. And I was wondering if you'd be open to having a quick little chat about how you do and then the problem that you solve, and then just send that email out to people. And what you'll find is that most people won't respond, but some will. And the ones that do respond will very likely become your first customers. Then the last thing that I'd do is I'd also build a database of service providers or sellers that you can connect with your buyers. So if you do get on a call with someone that you've reached out to and they say to you, hey, we do look for like Webflow developers from time to time. Do you know anyone? If you already have a database with like 4 or 5 people that you could potentially recommend, then you're already delivering value in the market, okay? And then the last thing is don't shy away from charging for what you do from day one, because if you take an approach of saying, oh, actually, I'm going to do it for free until my platform's built, then all you're going to find out is that people are happy to use your service for free. And when you end up building your platform, you won't know if the problem is big enough that people are willing to pay for it. And so that is my message. If you are someone that's seen the Unicorn Factory and you want to know what features I have, just rewind this video a few times just to see what it's all like. But ultimately, the key to success early on is to find your customers and to start delivering value immediately and to also start charging for it. Now, before I leave, I want to pitch something because, if you're like, okay, I do have an idea for a marketplace and I do think that this is a good strategy, but I don't know how any of this stuff works or how I can build my landing page, I got you covered. So I started this community called the MVMP Labs, where I basically put a bunch of tutorials on how to use some of my favorite no-code tools like Webflow, Make, Airtable, Glide, Stripe. I have some OpenAI stuff, some MailerLite stuff, all that kind of stuff. And it's basically set up for anyone who is brand new to these tools to get started. And so I've got a whole bunch of video content. We've got courses, we've got workshops. Some of the courses also have templates that you can use, for example, Webflow templates that you can copy and paste into your project, Make.com blueprints that you can simply copy and paste into your own Make.com account, Airtable scripts. We also have a whole bunch of different founders who are working on job boards, marketplace businesses. So not just are you going to learn the skills, you're also going to connect with other people who are working on similar projects to you. And all of this is just like an annual membership thing that you can join. Now, specifically regarding to this video, I have a course on here that is part of the MVMP Labs called the Landing Page Engine. And this is really the perfect starting point for anyone who's like, all right, I want to get my marketplace up and running. And so what you'll learn here is how to use tools like Webflow to build your landing page. I'll also show you how to use, Reloom to basically speed up your Webflow development process. I'll show you how to use the Webflow CMS to create dynamic landing pages. So if you want to create like category specific pages or location location specific pages. You'll figure out how that works here. I'll show you how you can use tools like OpenAI to automatically generate the copy for your landing page, how you can use Airtable as your like control center for all the information that passes through your site, and a bunch of other things, you know, some SEO stuff and just fun things. And this is a really good course for people who are just brand new to it. So if you do want to get your marketplace off the ground, this is the path. I'm going to leave it here. I hope this was useful. If there are any questions about it, please let me know. Other than that, have a great rest of your week. Bye.